Simon Goodwin's 9 years at Melbourne have come to an end. Just ahead of the dissection and the analysis, Gaz, just take a moment to pause. He's an immense figure at two footy clubs. He's a Hall of Famer at Adelaide, and he's one of 4 Premiership coaches at the oldest footy club at all. So perhaps maybe you're best to speak about his legacy and maybe indulge us with your connection to him.
Yeah, I'm just seeing this stuff in the background here. I will have a connection with him forever. That's one of the greatest days of my life from a football perspective, and this is a club that I've loved for a long time, and wondered at various stages whether we'd ever get ourselves out of the mire and back to a position where we could bring a premiership. And so Bert Chadwick, Frank Checker Hughes, Norm Smith and Simon Goodwin are the 4 men that have delivered a premiership to the oldest football club in this game. And that puts him in rare air. He's a hero of this football club and will be forever and a day. And if Melbourne supporters haven't taken a moment today to thank him for what he and the players were able to do on this day, then they should. And I know it hasn't ended in the manner that they would like it, and we can talk about the reasons why. But that's one of the greatest days ever. 57 years in the making, that was. And I tell you what, I've been here since 1984, and there was times where, I didn't know whether our club was either going to exist, let alone win a premiership again. So Simon Goodwin delivered that, and he'll be a hero forever. And it hasn't finished in the manner that he would have liked today, and we'll unpack that now.
And they built a great premiership, didn't they? As one in adverse circumstances, away from home.
Amazing, yeah.
And they did win it with a team that was great in its moment.
Yeah, it was, and those boys will be heroes forever. And I was driving around today with the radio switched on, like everyone was, sort of listening, and this nonsense about whether it was a real premiership. I mean, if any Melbourne supporter saying that, you're not a true Melbourne fan. This was, I know we'd all loved it to have been at the MCG, but have a look at that. Have a look at these scenes here. That'll live on forever. And of course, we all would have loved it to be more than one, but it wasn't. But geez, I'm thankful there was one.
Last night's decision. So it's a board that, through Brad Green and its presidents, has expressed its desire for change. They want a new voice. They want a new leader. They've clearly lost faith that Simon could and would be able to turn this around, either in the short or the medium term. And rather than it be about him being the last premiership coach, they couldn't see him as the next premiership coach. Yeah. Did they make the case convincingly for change?
Not today, but press conferences are difficult. I mean, there's got, you know, Brad just kept getting asked, and he kept saying, "Oh, we need a new voice." Now, there's obviously got to be greater nuance and level of detail about why the board, the Melbourne Footy Club board, have reached the decision that Simon Goodwin is not to go on. They've just sacked the premiership coach, and they want to have, you know, reasons more than just a new voice, which I suspect there is in their own mind. So, like Simon, you respect the decision. It's a tough decision. It wouldn't be easy for Brad Green, who's a former captain of this football club as well, to sack a premiership coach.
Is it a justifiable decision?
Yeah, I think they can justify it in their own mind. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but I'm not railing, you know, and slamming the desk and saying this is... He's been there 9 years. He's had a good run at it. He's delivered the ultimate. I would hope and hope that he coached the year out, and they may have arrived at the Luke Beveridge situation where we say, look, you know, let's find out, let's push hard for this next year and don't extend you, but let's coach for your life. But it's not to be. And Simon was class. I thought he was a classy performer today. It was almost as good as he's performed. He's never been a natural media performer, which has been, I think, a bit of the problem for Melbourne fans. He hasn't got natural charisma, if you like. He is in private. And there was a hint of that today.
Yep.
Humour and a bit of self-deprecation. And there is absolutely no question those players love him. And there's absolutely no question in my mind that he has been coaching not to save his job. He's been coaching to set the club up again, to have another tilt at it. But there's been some wrinkles along the way, and too many, it would appear, for the board. And that's the prerogative. This is where you hope that you've got a great board, Gerard. This is when football club, and you, as a supporter, I don't know whether you get involved with the election of boards. These days it's a bit different, but geez, you hope you've got a good board who make good decisions.
So there's the 2 years of straight set exits, and then there's 2 years of decline. We'll get to the complexities around this year in a tick, but how much do you think the sameness around the way Melbourne would lose strategically, which you've identified, and it's driven people mad? How much of that, the lack of connection to the forward part of the ground, plays a role, do you think?
I think that has been a contributing factor. I don't know whether it's... because I think that's started to evolve in recent times, and I could throw out all sorts of numbers to you to say that they have been connecting a bit better recently. But it was the sameness for a long time, and that was a frustration for him. He sat here, we asked him about it. But it's sort of greater than that. I think it's It's a football club that's confused at the moment exactly where they are. And it's a football club that's disconnected. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It has been for a long time. So then you go to support mechanisms for your coaching structure, and it was pertinent that he mentioned it 4 or 5 times today. You must have a strong, stable off-field support mechanism, and I doubt whether he's felt that over the last couple of years.
Yes, and this is where this year's scenario plays a role. This is a football club that's lived in a void this year. It would have been a miracle if the coach had been successful in these circumstances, identifying the need for change last year, but not being able to execute change. The next president is not in the job, and the chief executive was appointed in April and doesn't start till September. There's no elite program in the world that has those pillars absent and achieves success. So stability, he hasn't had stability since Peter Jackson left, and there's no point denying that. No. But alignment. So the alignment was clearly lost. Is from the very first team he picked this year, which had 5 debutants in it, you went, oh, hello. He's not coaching for the here and the now, and he's not coaching for his job. He's coaching for the shortest possible turnaround, knowing that he's got 2 years to achieve that. That you don't get that disconnect if you're in constant contact with the president and the chief executive who aren't in their positions. I think it undermined his capacity to do the job that he knew needed to be done. And when you know is when Brad Green says, well, this board expects to be playing finals. Yeah. Simon Goodwin didn't expect to be playing finals this year.
I think that's a really good point. And as a coach, when you're in this state of transition and, in his own mind, he may be looking at this club and saying, I need to make serious change here. Who am I selling that to? Am I selling that to Brad? Am I selling it to the interim? Do I have to sell it to Garry when he comes in? Do I have to sell it to Stephen Smith? And now I've got to sell it to the playing group. And it might have been to the stage where I think he had arrived at the point where he understood that there needed to be substantial change. And then you go to the playing group and say, what is your motivation here? And I think that's another part of what we discussed today. This is a footy club who went to the top, as we've seen, and then I think have struggled with their reason for being as an individual in amongst a team setting. What is the motivation for the leaders of that football club? From the top down, no one questions Max. All the way down, what underpins this footy club? Are we team first, or are we individual that hopefully spills into the team? And I think that's fundamental to where this disconnect comes. I think the board sits at it and looks, we should be better. Yeah. We have him, and him in amongst these. And I think from a coaching point of view, they go, OK, well, they are individually outstanding, but collectively they're not getting it done, so there needs to be change. Slowly moving some magnets, slowly doing a thing. I'm not sure whether they've embraced it. When they won the Premiership, they were the most selfless team in the competition, and it was trotted out everywhere. I don't think they are now, and I'm not sure whether the board over the journey has been particularly selfless as well.
Yeah. So if the coach had come to the conclusion that it was time to break up the senior core, where would he have taken that
who do you
idea?
sell that to?
He didn't know whether he had the support of the board. I suspect he knew that last Monday after that board meeting. He's got a footy director who is closely aligned to, and it's hard to imagine that change doesn't come as well. He doesn't have a chief executive, and the president's not going to be there. So I think to run a circumstance like that is to invite failure, and then to cast judgment on the man who didn't know he was coaching for his life right now. You can only get that when there's a void, and Melbourne have lived in a void.
They're screaming out for a figurehead, Gerard. A strong, decisive leader of this football club, apart from the coach. They're screaming out for it. Is it going to be Stephen Smith, Paul Garry? I don't know, but over the journey, that has not been there.
The biggest question that sits over them now is, has the dynasty been squandered for what might have been? So 2021 is magnificently won. They start 2022 10-0. Yeah. And every branch of the footy club has to own this, from the board, who were involved in pitted battles with the former president for far too long, to the administration, who didn't face up to the flaws in the culture. They didn't address the locker room, and then they denied what was happening publicly. For the players on all sorts of different fronts, from the Entrecôte bust up to the players who weren't diligent around their professional careers and the implications of that, the unfortunate injury suffered by Christian Petrarca and the club's terrible failing in dealing with him as a human being, let alone a player, and then the coaching setup, which wasn't able to rectify the one flaw in their game. So they finished top 4 the next 2 years and go out in straight sets before the decline sets in.
Yeah, the next year after the grand final, the fundamental job is to put yourself in a position to win the Premiership, and they did that in the following 2 years. They won 16, they had 16 win seasons back to back and got themselves where they needed to be. Failed badly, I would say, in 2022. Lost those 2 finals to Sydney and Brisbane, and then put that aside and had another good 2023. Lost to Collingwood by 7 points, and then the 2-point loss to Carlton. Really disappointing, but. The straight sets sort of infers that they just fumbled it away. They didn't. They put themselves right there again and fell short. And that can be a failing if you consider that, the talent on the list was better than that. But that's what happens, and it's hard to back up, as we've seen in recent times. The last 2 years have been enormously disappointing, and all the things you talked about off-field and the unsettled nature of it all are reasons. But Simon would also have to own, and the coaching group own, the other aspects of that, because the discipline and maybe your loyalty to the group that took you to the Premiership is so strong that perhaps in another world you would have come down harder on them. But I think there'd be a lot of people that would suggest they did make the most of the list. There's no problem. There's no issue about that.
And so how much of that sits with the club? So every level of it, as judgment is cast today, all those pillars are eventually going to change for the new start. Is how much does the club own that they didn't get all that they might have out of the era that they built?
Well, if they don't, then they'll wallow in the mediocrity for another 5 or 6 years, Gerard. So the best teams are the honest teams. And the honesty starts at the top. Did we get that right? From the board, honesty sessions there, down to the coaching group and then to the playing group. And look at yourselves and just say, how much time have we invested in the last 2 to 3 years, or since we won that Premiership, in getting back to what made us great? Or how much did we then go and splinter and worry about ourselves individually?
So what to do next? And this is specific to the team. Contention or rebuild? So to listen to Brad Green today, they hold a view, whether they should or they shouldn't, whether they're equipped to form that view or not, is they believe that they should be playing finals. And there's not many who agree with them on that front.
Yeah, so Brad says to the list capable of playing finals. Goodwin all year has said this is a team in transition and that it may take time. And in his mind, he thought he had next year. And so if you're going to go to the market, the footy, I think most of the footy world agrees that the game has evolved and Melbourne had been relatively stagnant. So you're preparing for a life that doesn't necessarily revolve around Oliver, Petrarca and Viney, and it might be Lingford, Langford and Windsor. And then the club have got to buy into that. So then you go, OK, well, that's going to take a bit more time. That's not, that transition means that finals are at absolute best, not absolutely, a given. So then you go to the coaching group, and if you're selling the wrong message to a coach, the smart coach is saying, well, why would I go to that group where the expectation is so out of alignment where the list is at? And so all those decisions have got to be made. I think they're in transition and flux, and they are changing, and they do want to change what's been driving them for a long time. And that means you probably go back a bit and you're going to hang around. But if you draft well and you continue to invest in Windsor, Langford and Lindsay, then they're hoping they get that right.
If Max has got 2 years left, could they contend again while he's there, in your mind?
Everything would have to go absolutely right. You're banking on Oliver getting back to his very best and Petrarca getting back to his best. But you're also you're banking May and Lever and all that leadership group to just have some humility about where they've been, accept what is there, and then get back to work. And I think that's a question that needs asking, and only they can answer that.
It's a big decision. It makes me wonder who's making it. Are you holding the core of it together, or are you breaking it up? Are you imposing it on a new coach, or are you asking a new coach to come in and make those decisions? What do they need in a new coach?
Well, I don't think you rule anything in or out. I know it's a wishy-washy answer, but no one can sit here and say they need a fresh coach who's never coached before who's going to come in, or they need a Premiership coach who's been to the... Well, all of those would be on the table. And I don't think... if you rule in or out, you miss out on Fagan, you miss out on the first year McRae, or you miss out on, someone having a second go at it. So it's a tough one. It's a really hard one. And so then you've got to have faith in the club to choose wisely. And there's no guarantee, Gerard.
That's the tricky part,
isn't it?
And
then you've got to get your CEO with his feet under the desk.
Yep. So Will Faulkner's written a piece for Fox Sports tonight. He says John Longmire is the top of Melbourne's list. There's an inescapable logic to that, isn't there?
There is. You can... what I'm not involved in is selling these things to supporters and sponsors, Gerard. You just want the best man. Fortunately, you can sell horse. You can sell horse to anyone. Well, he'll be here tomorrow night, and you'll know that the question's coming. So if he's got any inkling at all, then I would imagine the call will be made, if it hasn't already.
Yeah, so the spectrum is quite interesting. Do you headhunt one, or do you take it to the process? And so you've got Cam Bruce, who's sitting there at the Brisbane Lions with a wealth of experience, and his heart belongs to Melbourne from a former days. Do you want, it's the whole spectrum, or are you going, we're going to get him?
You've been involved in the media for a long time, Gerard. I get you and I get 5 others from different medias and say, let's pick a name, then you can have him at the front of the queue by Thursday night with no justification at all. It's just who you want to make the flavour of the month. John Longmire doesn't have to worry about that.
No.
He's got runs on the board.
Tonight's list is never right unless a club chooses to go and target one person rather than, which is the Gold Coast experience with Damien Hutwick.
Yes, so then you'd say, OK, maybe that's the reason they went early, because they wanted to shop early, because they maybe have someone in mind. I didn't know he was getting sacked, so I sure as hell don't know the answer to that.
Cathartic?
Cleansed.
All right.